We have some strategies in place to make sure that we're always hiring A people. For example, on the engineering side, one of the practices we have is if we have 5, 6 people interview someone, we have kind of a single veto policy. So if one person doesn't like that person and everyone else loves them, we will pass on that candidate. And sometimes we pass on really good candidates based on that, but it really keeps the bar high.
Welcome to Modern Entrepreneur. Today we have John Walker, who's the CTO and one of the founders of AppFolio, a Santa Barbara software company and an industry leader in cloud-based property management software. Prior to AppFolio, he led the engineering development and quality assurance teams as CTO of Versora and for Miramar Systems. The software developed under his direction has since been deployed to over 20 million computers worldwide. In addition to being a tech CTO, he also teaches computer science courses as an adjunct professor at Westmont College and the University of California at Santa Barbara. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start without one of our normal questions, just because we started our businesses right around the same time, I think.
Yes.
I remember when we had just kind of gotten going, we went out to lunch. This was, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And
we started in 2006, basically.
Yeah, so. Okay. But even before that, you were doing research and stuff like that, because we started in 2004, and I remember going out to lunch with you guys, and you were doing the you introduced me actually to the Steve Blank's program.
Yeah, I did market validation, and yes.
So you were figuring out the property management space, and decided to pull the trigger on that, and you and Klaus and what was the other guy's name?
Jim Simic?
Jim, yeah. Mm-hmm. Launched this business, and it's just absolutely exploded. So you were just saying 600-700 people, public company, raised $60 million along the way, now a market cap over $1 billion. Absolutely insane, especially for a 10 years, Santa Barbara company. What's the secret?
Probably this isn't much of a secret, but I think we just really have great people, and we've been very fortunate to hire great people in leadership positions and just throughout the organization.
Interesting.
And I definitely believe that's a secret. And it started, Jim Simic he was a consultant for us back then, helping us with the market validation process. He was fantastic. But we've hired great CEOs and kind of great people in leadership and marketing and sales and services, and we've just been very fortunate there. Engineering, of course, that's kind of my area that I really care about and I'm passionate about, so we've been really fortunate. Yeah,
fortunate, but also you caused that. So what is the wisdom that you've kind of like brought to the table around getting great people on this team? There's a war, right, for great people to get them to devote their time to your cause. No matter how much you pay them. It's not just about money, it's about really attracting people to a mission and to a project. How have you been so successful with that?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a platitude, but we've always really cared about culture, and I think there's some elements to that. We have a really learning culture and entrepreneurial culture, which is kind of appropriate that we're talking about this now, but we've always really allowed people to thrive in that kind of way, and so we've done a lot of things along the way that really reinforced allowing our people to operate independently, make decisions themselves. We really try to drive decisions down into the smallest, the people that are actually doing the work and closest to the front lines. Yeah. We do a lot of information sharing. In fact, when we went public, that was one of the big discussions we had, is how are we going to continue to share all the information that we want to share with employees so that they can make great decisions for the business. And so we've done a lot of that. We've really we have a monthly company meeting where we share a lot of key information about the business. We've always been very transparent internally, and so I think that makes it attractive. We, entrepreneurially, we do things like, I love to tell a story like in engineering. We still today work in teams of about 6 or 7 people.
Oh, wow. With you were saying like a couple hundred engineers?
Yeah, we have over 200 probably on the engineering team, and we work in these small teams of 6 or 7 people, and they have very much leeway to define even what they're working on and also how they go about it. And a lot of times we'll give them projects, like a project might be something like we measure Net Promoter Score. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but so we measure Net Promoter Score, and we know the Net Promoter Score for different types of users in our system. And some of the users are tougher than others. For example, accountants use our system, and they tend to be a little tough on us.
Yeah.
And so, like one of the things that we've done in the past was we gave an engineering team the assignment of making accountants happier by and measuring it by NPS. And so that team had total leeway. They actually
figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and
Engineers.
so they went to the services team. They made some changes to how we did services. They implemented some big features. They implemented some small features. They did a lot of stuff to actually make that happen.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So I think that
And did it work?
Yes, it did. It actually did. I wouldn't be telling it if it wasn't a success story. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I think that that's, I think that that's something that we've really worked to preserve, even now that we're a much larger company, is that we still have that entrepreneurial spirit. And so I think AppFolio is still a great place for that. And that's why we've been attracted, good talent, I think, for a long time.
So I always ask, what is your unique skill set? And obviously, you're an engineering guy, but to run engineers are a challenging crowd, and to run a team of 200 engineers takes something unique. What makes you successful at that?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a joke, but I always say like my only real talent is attracting other good people around me. So I mean, I do not run a team of 200 engineers. I have a whole bunch of great leaders, and they have leaders that run the team, and so I think that's really the secret sauce there. I think we try to hire really smart people. We have some strategies in place to make sure that we're always hiring A people. For example, on the engineering side, one of the practices we have is if we have 5-6 people interview someone, we have kind of a single veto policy. So if one person doesn't like that person and everyone else loves them, we will pass on that candidate. And sometimes we pass on really good candidates based on that, but it really keeps the bar high.
Yeah.
And I think for engineers, they really want to work with other smart people that are going to challenge them and give them new ideas, and then also they want to have impact in what they do.
Right.
And so we put them really close to the customer. I kind of talked about how we do the NPS thing, and put them right away. They're kind of delivering value to the customer. If you're an engineer that comes to AppFolio and in the first 2 weeks you haven't been talking to a customer in some way, listening to a call or something like that, you're probably, there's a few people like that, and they're working on like very back-end infrastructure, but almost everyone's doing that in the first couple weeks they're there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think our engineers spend a lot of time. We have a lot of ways of getting feedback to them.
Yeah.
But actually getting them listening on calls is unusual, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. So obviously a lot of the people, basically everyone who is going to watch this is not running a $1 billion market cap business, and almost none of them are going to be running 200-person teams, let alone 600 or 700-person teams. But one of the things that you're kind of bringing up for me is the realization and that pretty quickly, if you're going to grow, you're not going to be doing a lot of the work, right? You talked about you said I don't run a 200-person team, right? I have leaders that have leaders, and I'm sure you don't write any code, or if you do, it's for fun,
just for
right?
fun, yes.
Yeah. So what would you recommend? I mean, so you got to plan for that, right? You got to think through in advance, like, pretty quickly, I'm not going to be the one who's doing the lion's share of the work, right? When you first started, you were, right? You probably wrote.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yeah, and then it didn't take long, I'm sure, for you guys for you personally to be at a point where you're doing like a tiny percentage of the work, right? And so what the work becomes is about leadership and making sure people stay engaged and work on the right problems and come up with the right solutions. How do you suppose you could help somebody that's got 5 or 10 employees think through what it's going to take to get to that point where they're no longer doing half the work around here, but their job becomes leadership?
Yeah, well, I think the way to think about it is to just always be obsoleting yourself out of a job. And my title's actually been the same for all 10 years of AppFolio. I've been the CTO and co-founder, I guess, of AppFolio. But my job's changed pretty radically, like 5 times, from like early days where I was writing some code to
Right.
managing a small team and doing maybe even some product management to then, now we've got product management and some leadership in there. Now I'm more like a VP of engineering. And then at some point I was kind of very strategic on the technology side, which is more like a traditional CTO role. And even now I'm like, it's changed again where I'm a little bit more of future vision. And I'm still involved in the technology, but it's a different role. And so I think, one thing that I've been very comfortable with over the years is kind of just always obsoleting myself out and getting someone else in there. And I can tell you we've had a lot of success with that, where we've given people opportunity to have a new role. Maybe if they didn't have the experience and they could just grow into it, and they brought new ideas and new thoughts to it, and it was very, very successful. And so that's what I encourage someone to do, even with 5 people, is be thinking like, how do I get someone else to take over some of the stuff that I'm doing that'll be a real challenge for them, and where they'll bring new thinking to that.
Totally. But entrepreneurs, we're also worried about like things falling apart and our employees not doing things the way we would or as good as we can. How do you get comfortable? I mean, you've now let go of job after job after job. How do you get comfortable with kind of like taking your hands off the reins?
Well, I mean, I'm like a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm a little bit of a control freak, and so I do have to fight that, I think, a little bit. One of the things I think is important is that you want to give people enough power to, move the ship back and forth, but not steer it into an iceberg. So like anything where it could be catastrophic, the consequences, you want to have a little bit of control around it. Anything else, you're much better off actually giving it to someone who's much closer to the problem and is going to have innovative solutions. And so, I have to fight that, I think, a little bit myself, just to make sure that I'm doing the right thing there. But I've had so much repeated success with it, and I can tell you, when I kind of gave up, my title was never VP of engineering, but when I stopped being in the role of VP of engineering, the VP of engineering that came along after me was 100 times better than I would ever be. Right. And so I've had that experience over and over again, and that always reinforces it. And so I'd say go take a risk and try that with someone, give them a challenge. Yeah,
and then to learn over time that you can get people that are better than you at like roll after roll after roll.
And the truth is, really good people want that. So if you don't offer that to them, they're not going to be attracted to your organization, and you're going to end up basically micromanaging the whole thing, and that's not a growing organization.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So what is your sort of cutting edge right now? What are you learning and working on personally?
Oh, personally?
I'm
always reading a book.
You're learning French?
I'm not learning French, or that's kind of a Mark Zuckerberg thing. I'm learning a new language or something. I'm always reading a book. I'm always listening to an audiobook. The book I'm reading right now is called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And I told you about a little bit about how Folio is a learning organization. I think that comes a little bit from both Klaus, my co-founder, and I have been in academia, and so we kind of have that naturally in us. So that's kind of the book that's actually floating around, and there's a number of groups that are reading it and discussing it, and I'm part of one of those groups. And it's a really interesting book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. It basically talks about how to challenge people very directly, but in a way that you care for them. And so it's really about how to be a really good manager, but also peer and advisor and all these things. And I'm only a little bit into the book. The first half of the book tells about how you do this and why you do this, or why you do this, and the second half's kind of like a lot of specific how, and I haven't gotten to that part yet. But
so that's the cutting edge.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm doing. So yeah.
Awesome. So if you could go back, you've had a pretty successful run here, 10 years to $1 billion, but still, there's always lessons that we learn, mistakes we make along the way. What would you tell your early founder self to do differently?
People ask me that question all the time, and this isn't being disingenuous. Every mistake we made, we learned something from, and so I don't know that there's any of them that I'd change. I think there's times when we were more cautious than we should have been. Maybe we should have gone for something a little bit quicker than we did. And there was times also when we jumped into something and should have thought about it a little bit more. Right. And it's hard for me to even come up with specific examples, because all of them I just kind of put in that, hey, I learned something from this category.
Yeah. Well, that really speaks to the kind of like relationship with sort of like mistakes or failure or setbacks that you have as an entrepreneur, right? Like many of us take failures heavier than that, right? And your ability to just go like, okay, to look back over 10 years and go like, yeah, it was all perfect. I would have done those again, or I got something out of that that was more than the cost. I think speaks to your relationship with the process more than anything, right?
And definitely it wasn't perfect, and I don't want to give that impression.
No,
we made lots of mistakes, but in general, we went on the path we wanted to go on. We have the same vision today that we had back then, which is to build software for a number of different small to medium businesses in different markets. And so that was the original vision. It's still the vision today, and we're still excited about it. Employees are excited about it. And, we're in 2 verticals today, which is property management, and we do software for small offices. And our goal is to do more of them. And so I think we're still really passionate about that. And, so I don't want to, I wish I could come up with like huge mistakes we made. I think I was very fortunate too, in that I have a great co-founder. Our CEO just retired, Brian Donahue, and we've got a new CEO, Jason Randall. But they were both, we just had a great relationship the entire time, and we did a lot of divide and conquer, and we're very complementary. And I think that helped us a lot from avoiding some mistakes. But I don't know.
It's hard to call it wrong when it's worked out this well. When you think about what it's all for, what would you like your...
Oh, sorry, can I go back and go one more?
Please do.
Yeah, so I will tell you one mistake we made, because it is pretty educational. So we actually made a product that didn't work out. And we target, kind of our software is built for property managers that are professional property managers, so they're managing maybe 50 units up to about 3,000 units. And we built a product for the very low end, kind of the landlord market. And we had invested a lot in it. It had actually achieved pretty significant revenue, but we could just see that it wasn't going to grow the way we wanted to the rest of the business. There were some problems with that market, and we actually had to go and make the decision to shut it down.
Oh, wow.
And we just totally abandoned it at one point. We took care of the customers and did the right thing there, but so that was kind of a mistake where we went down a wrong path on a product and ended up having to make the tough decision. There was a lot of people that were really invested in it and had put a lot of effort into it, and so that's kind of one example of a...
How do you know when to stop, with a project like that? I think that a lot of us invest, whether, it may not be a product, but for example, a marketing program or something like that, everybody says, shoot, you should be doing Facebook advertising, or you should be doing a podcast, or whatever it might be, and everything's hard, right? And how do you know that you're not quitting right before things start to work
out? Yeah, I think that's a challenge, because like as an entrepreneur, you have to have vision, right? And you sometimes have to work against obstacles and keep going with that vision, even when some of the signs are saying, oh, you shouldn't go this way.
Yeah.
I think there's a point though where you actually are fooling yourself that this is going to work out, and I don't know how to. It's kind of one of those, like, you'll see it when you get there, although it's really hard for entrepreneurs to recognize that themselves. And so we've actually had a great board of advisors, and we got a lot of input there, and a lot of times they make us look at ourselves in the mirror pretty hard. And I think that's one of the things that, if you're an entrepreneur running a small organization or even doing marketing, you want to have someone who will actually tell you the direct truth and kind of say, hey, you know what? I see where you're going with this, but I can't see where it's ever going to get here. Right. And if you're an entrepreneur and you say, you know what, there's 5 more things I know that we can try to go that way, keep going.
Yeah.
But if it's like you're really stretching, like I'm hoping this works out, and it's going to take a real long shot to make this work, then something's not going quite the right way.
Yeah, hope is a good sign.
Yeah.
When you're like kind of hoping and praying instead of planning.
Yeah, there's a difference between conviction kind of and wishful thinking,
Yeah.
So.
And what could you have seen, do you think, before you even invested all? Because that's brutal, right? To I don't know how much you invested, but you build a whole product and get a whole marketing team around it and get salespeople on it and get customers on it. And I mean, that was probably a multi-million-dollar, flush of
Yes,
cash, right?
It was.
So it would have been nice to avoid that. What could you have seen, do you think, in advance that would have how'd you avoid that?
Well, I'm a big believer in this idea of market validation.
Yeah.
And market validation, the real simple way to explain it is the way most startups happen is someone comes up with an idea, and this works for kind of any business. Someone comes up with an idea, you start to build a product, you go, oh, you know what, we're gonna have to start selling this thing soon. And so you get some marketing people and some sales people. Then you get to like a later phase, like maybe a beta, and you're like, we're really gonna have to sell this thing soon. And for technology companies, a lot of times you hire a PR firm there, and you hire a couple marketing people, more sales people. And then you launch the product, and that's when you learn everything. And sometimes, unfortunately, you learn that, oh, no one wanted that product.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of startups, they run out of money at that point. They have a product no one wants, and the startup fails.
Yeah.
Or kind of limps along forever.
Right.
So the idea of market validation is instead of design, build, sell, you try to move the selling up front. And obviously it's tricky and a little subtle because now you're selling something you don't have. There's definitely some subtleties to that. But I think that was something where we had done that with this product that I was talking about, and we didn't listen to some of the things we heard.
Interesting.
So for example, one of the problems with the product was individual landlords. It was a screening and payment service for individual landlords. Well, individual landlords do those kind of activities about once every year, once every 2 years, depending on, if they've got 1 or 2 units, people aren't moving out that often.
Right.
And so by the time they go to do it again, they've forgotten your product. And so you have to sell to them over and over and over and over again, which is an expensive proposition.
Right.
We heard that in market validation and kind of had some thoughts of, oh, well, maybe we can convert them to, they're going to grow and they're going to convert into our customers of our property management product.
Oh, right.
And we didn't, I think we heard that, but we still kind of, it was the wishful thinking thing.
Yeah.
And, but I'm a big believer in the idea of market validation, and it doesn't guarantee you success. It basically helps you get a lot of the bad news out up front.
Yeah. It's tough, I will say. I mean, I remember you guys introduced me to the 4 steps of the Epiphany, which is kind of like the original text on this thing. I'm sure there's
a guy named Stephen Blank. He's awesome. A lot of people have read Eric Ries's Lean Startup book.
Right.
And it talks about exactly the same thing, except for he refers to it as customer development. But it's a really important concept. And you're right, it's hard to execute.
It's super hard.
Yeah.
We tried. We did the whole process. But totally deluded ourselves early on, and convinced ourselves through the process that we had a winner. And this is back in the early days before we actually did find traction. But it took us years. I mean, you guys came out swinging in 2006. We didn't get anything going really until 2009. Because we just whiffed early on in that process, and it is super easy to delude yourself, and to kind of like listen to the people who are excited, to the 2 people who are excited, and ignore the 10 people who don't even understand what you're talking about.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and I think people don't believe this, but we actually start out with just a slide deck that we used to do this, and we would say, we would talk directly to customers, and we the slides were basically, here's the pains we've heard. We've talked to some people. We think these are your problems. Right. And hopefully what you hear that then is like, oh yeah, and that one's really important to me. That one's really important to me. Right. Sometimes you even hear the right words to use to talk to them when you're selling them software. Yeah. And then the next slide was, here's what we're going to do. And we were kind of realistic about it. We're not going to build, 10 years worth of software in 6 months, but here's our first version. And then we had another slide that was, here's what we're not going to do, so it won't include these things. We're realistic. Then the last slide was, would you buy it? And before we had started, we had 10 customers who said, you build that, I'll buy it. And we heard a lot of things. Like one of the things we heard there was a lot of pain in the industry. One of the very early customers we talked to said, here, I'm going to send you a document. We said, what do you think of your existing solution? They said, I'm going to send you a document. We're like, okay. And they sent over the document. They're like, that's the list of 300 things that are wrong with my existing software.
Holy smokes.
And that's what we were like, wow, I've never made a list of 300 of anything. You really are in pain. And another thing we heard, for example, is after a while, we were starting to nail the problems. So we'd hear like, oh yeah, those are my problems. Oh, that would be so great if you delivered that. And then on our not to do list, we actually had accounting. And one of the reasons was we thought, oh, there's QuickBooks out there, and you know what, accounting's hard. I don't know that we understand it super well. Yeah. And we would have, excitement. Yeah, those are my problems. Oh, I'd love to. This is really exciting. Oh, it doesn't have accounting. Forget it. And we wouldn't even get to the would you buy it decision.
Oh, wow.
And so very early on, we had to switch that. And and
so you built accounting too.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And by the way, we went. We spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that right, and tried. We even looked at like how could we not build it by partnering with someone. But we could have easily gone and built the whole software product without the accounting and got to the end and be selling it and had people say no. And with 4 slides and a couple of customer calls, we found out that has to be part of the product.
It has to be part of the thing. Yeah, crucial.
So yeah.
Interesting. And you can use that, you figure, with like not just software products, but services.
Absolutely, yeah. The key is putting someone to a buying decision at the end to where you're really getting real feedback.
And like actually writing a check?
I think that that's the key. Now, someone will say, well, you know, what about Facebook or something where I'm doing it's a service and people aren't necessarily paying for it. There's still a buying decision there. The buying decision is a little different. It's more like, will I invest my time to use that?
Oh, right.
You know,
right.
You got to figure out what that buying mechanism is. The easiest one is when it's money, and I think that's the best one.
Yeah.
But sometimes the buying decision is something else, like will they invest enough time to learn this, or will they invest enough time to use the product, or you know, will they spend time on this page or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the key. And I always explain that to people. I have a little analogy I use where I explain that to people where I say, and most entrepreneurs have had this experience. You know, I may come to you and I may say, Landon, you know, we're really good friends. I'm super excited. I'm going to build a teleporter. I've talked to a professor at UCSB, and you know, the technology's there. They're already moving mice back and forth, and I know we can do it with people. I'm really passionate about this idea. And if you're my friend and not like an investor or something, your feedback, what's it going to be if I'm really passionate and excited?
Awesome, do it, man.
Yeah, awesome, go for it, right? Which that's what I would do to a friend too, right? It's like, now if I say to you, I say all the same stuff, I'm really excited, and then I say, oh, by the way, you're going to be the first customer. Can I have your credit card?
Yeah.
No, seriously, can I have your credit card?
Right.
All of a sudden, like even you, like get a little
different
tense.
different conversation.
Yeah, and your whole attitude changes, and you're going to start giving me real feedback, like, oh, you know, that'd be great.
I need to see 1,000 people go through it first.
Yes, or maybe, yeah, that's a great one. That's like a selling motion. How do you sell? Well, you're going to have to sign up 1,000 customers that just are going to try it so that you can get someone who really wants to buy it.
Yeah.
But you might say like, oh, you know what? That's great, but I have a teleporter. I have to go into a central office. Could I go from my home? And then now you know, oh, it's got to have the teleport from home feature.
Right.
Or you might go, you know what? Oh, you want me to pay $500 for it? Great. I spent $1,000 on my current teleporter. Or no, I wouldn't pay more than $250 for a teleporter.
Right.
I'm picking a little bit of a ridiculous example, but you get the idea. It's like you've got to, in that market validation process, you've got to put someone to that buying decision to really get the real feedback.
Yep, that's so true. I think that's actually the piece that we actually missed. Because we had a lot of people saying yes and apparently being really enthusiastic. But when it came down to, this is an earlier pre-Ontraport product.
Yes.
But when we came down to actually, like, we produced it and we're like, here we go, let's sign it. You know, you said, and we got like 0 of them, like 0 out of 20 people that said that they were that they would totally buy it, actually bought when the time came.
Well, to your credit, you guys kind of recognized and changed.
Oh yeah, we
moved
stopped
along,
that day.
I mean, a lot of people will continue to delude themselves. Oh, you know what? We're just missing this one feature, or you know, that's like kind of how it goes a lot of times.
Well, I think in one sense we were lucky because we whiffed so hard that it was that it was really clear, right? Like it was literally that week I was just like, you know, I could do 100 times better and I'm still at 0. You know what I mean?
That's good.
Whereas
that's a good lesson, I think.
It's almost worse if you got, you know, like you get some traction and there's like hope and you start going like, maybe if I, you know, so anyway.
Right, one of the things I say is that most startups really don't fail. What they do is kind of go along status quo for a long time, and you know, like, you have one big customer and then, you know, you lose that customer, but you get another one and there's another deal if we just sign this deal, or you know, whatever your metric is, you know, and so they usually actually don't die. It's, you know, startups don't just go like up and gone. They usually kind of drag along, and that's when you know you've got something that's just not working. Yeah,
it's a tough one. So you've been at this for a while now, a couple of careers, several companies, leader of hundreds of people, creator of lots of opportunity. What would you like to look back on your career and have your legacy be?
Well, so definitely, you know, my hope for Appfolio is that it's a long-term sustainable business that people feel really good about working at long after I'm gone.
Yeah.
And so I think one of my big focuses now is keeping that entrepreneurial spirit as we grow there. And I would say it's still a place where there's a great entrepreneurial spirit there. It's always challenging to keep that as we grow, and so that's like that. I consider that my personal part of the legacy. You know, I'm not really a big I want people to remember me or anything like that. I just want to create a place that a lot of people feel good about, and you know, really, I think one of the other things that's really rewarding about Appfolio is a lot of our customers are small to medium businesses, and so you know, these are like family businesses, and you know, we're not curing cancer, but we're helping small businesses succeed, and that's really rewarding as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. What do you think it means to be a modern entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I definitely think of entrepreneurship in terms of starting companies myself, and that's something I've always been interested in. I think it's amazingly it's amazingly easy to start a company today.
Yeah.
It's still really challenging to make one successful.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously with tools like Ontraport and Amazon Web Services, and there's a lot of tools to help you be successful. That just weren't there. Even like to development frameworks, they've progressed so much to where you know you can do incredible software pretty quickly. But it's still really challenging to find a problem that people really care about, solve a pain, and all that part is really the hard part. And you know, so I would say being a modern entrepreneur is about trying things quickly and moving on when you find out something doesn't work. Because it's so easy to get things going quickly. You can actually do it way faster than you could before, where you had to, you know, invest a couple $1 million building a data center before you could ever launch a service and find out about it.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's, I think, the really important thing is moving quickly.
Awesome.
So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Would you mind signing our wall?
Oh, certainly.
Cool.
When we got started, we wanted to build a business that would allow us to be, you know, flexible.
You know, when you start a business, you're a one-man band.
Yeah.
You can relate to this. So you do everything.
Probably the #1 reason I am where I am right now is not because of all the things I say yes to, it's all the things I say no to.
I call it my genius zone. All of my girls have a genius zone in the community.
So if you're willing to like put attention on people and approve of them and, you know, find them right, good stuff happens to you.
If you look at times now versus 5 years ago, people are getting so many more emails, so many more communication messages.
You literally have to design your funnel just for a mobile person.
Yeah.
Look, that opportunity, if it's that good, it can wait.
With technology and automation comes a certain responsibility.
You don't need to be in Silicon Valley. You don't need to have a computer science degree.
We're forgetting the real world. We're forgetting the relationships with people.
I agree.
You can be anything you want to be in this world. All you have to do is believe.
It's all about that long game.